touching musical harmony, whether by instrument or by voice, it being but of high and low in sounds, a due proportionable disposition, such notwithstanding is the force thereof, and so pleasing effects it hath in that very part of man which is most divine, that some might have been thereby induced to think that the soul itself by nature is or hath in it harmony, a thing which delighteth all ages and beseemeth all states, a thing as seasonable in grief as in joy, as decent being added unto actions of greatest weight and solemnity, as being used when men most sequester themselves from action. The reason hereof is an admirable facility which music hath to express and represent to the mind more inwardly than any other sensible mean, the very standing and rising, falling, the very steps and inflections, every way the turns and varieties of all passions whereunto the mind is subject. Yea, so to imitate them, that whether it resemble unto us the same state wherein our minds already are, or a clean contrary, we are not more contentedly by the one confirmed, than changed and led away by the other. In harmony the very image and character, even of virtue and vice, is perceived. The mind delighted with their resemblances, and brought by having them more iterated into a love of the things themselves. For which cause there is nothing more contagious and pestilent than some kinds of harmony, than some nothing more strong and potent unto good. And that there is such a difference of one kind from another we need no proof but our own experience, inasmuch as we are at the hearing of some more inclined unto sorrow and heaviness, of some more mollified and softened in mind, one kind after to stay and settle us, another to move and stir our affections. There is that draweth to the marvellous grave and sober mediocrity. There is also that carrieth, as it were, ecstasies, filling the mind with an heavenly joy for the time, in a manner severing it from the body. So that although we lay altogether aside the considerations of ditty or matter, the very harmony of sounds being framed in due sort, and carried from the ear to the spiritual faculties of our soul, is by a native puissance and efficacy greatly available to bring to a perfect temper whatsoever is there troubled, apt as well as to quicken the spirits as to allay that which is too eager, sovereign against melancholy and despair, forcible to draw forth tears of devotion if the mind be such as they can yield them, able both to move and to moderate all affections. The prophet David, having therefore singular knowledge not in poetry alone, but in music also, judged them both to be things most necessary to the house of God, left behind him to that purpose a number of divinely indited poems, and was farther the author of adding unto poetry melody in public prayer, melody both vocal and instrumental, for the raising up of men's hearts, and for the sweetening of their affections towards God's. In which consideration the Church of Christ doth likewise at this present day retain it as an ornament to God's service, and as an help to our own devotion. They which under pretense of law ceremonial require the abrogation of instrumental music, approving nevertheless the use of vocal melody to remain, must shew some reason wherefore the one should be thought a legal ceremony, and not the other. And church music, curiosity and ostentation of art, wanton or light or unsuitable harmony, such as only pleaseth the ear and doth not naturally serve to the very kind and degree of those impressions which the matter that goeth with it leaveth, or is apt to leave in men's minds, doth rather blemish and disgrace, that we do then add either beauty or furtherance unto it. On the other side, these faults prevented, the force and efficacy of the thing itself, when it drowneth not utterly, but fitly suiteth that with matter altogether sounding to the praise of God, is in truth most admirable, and doth much edify, if not the understanding because it teacheth not, yet surely the affection, because therein it worketh much. They must have hearts very dry and tough, from whom the melody of psalms doth not sometimes draw that wherein a mind religiously affected delighteth. Be it, as Rabanus Marius observed, that the first The church in this exercise was more simple and plain than we are, that their singing was little more than only a melodious kind of pronunciation, that the custom which we now use was not instituted so much for their cause, which are spiritual, as to the end, that into grosser and heavier minds, whom bare words do not easily move, the sweetness of melody might make some entrance for good things. Saint Basil himself, acknowledging as much, did not think that from such inventions the least jot of estimation and credit thereby should be derogated. For, saith he, whereas the Holy Spirit saw that mankind is unto virtue hardly drawn, and that righteousness is the less accounted of by reason of the proneness of our affections to that which delighteth, it pleaseth the wisdom of the same Spirit to borrow from melody that pleasure which, and mingled with heavenly mysteries, causeth the smoothness and softness of that which toucheth the ear to convey as it were by stealth and treasure of good things into man's mind. To this purpose were those harmonious tombs of psalms devised for us, that they which are either in years but young, or touching perfection of virtue as yet not grown to ripeness, might when they think they sing, learn of the wise conceit of that heavenly teacher which hath by his skill found out a way, that doing those things wherein we delight, we may also learn, that whereby we profit.